Okay, quick interruption. If you're a founder who keeps saying, I need to figure out AI, but you're still the editor, the approver, the bottleneck, this is for you. You don't need another tutorial. You need 2 days to actually build. That's the AI in Action Conference, March 19th and 20th in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's not theory, it's implementation. Real systems, real workflows, real delegation for you and your business. I'll be there speaking, teaching you how to architect your voice so your team and AI can finally sound like you without rewriting everything. Early bird pricing won't last, so pause right now and use my link, hellodon.live/action 2026, and get in the room. Thought for the day. Your team didn't fail you. You just accidentally built a business that couldn't work without you. Hey, you're listening to She's That Founder, the podcast for ambitious female leaders who are ready to stop being the bottleneck in their business by using AI frameworks for faster delegation and decision-making. I'm Dawn Andrews, and today you'll discover why the ownership gap between you and your employees is built into the structure of your business, and why expecting them to close it on their own is setting everyone up to fail. You'll learn how to design culture in a small team that doesn't rely on founder-level emotional investment to function, and how to set leadership boundaries that actually reduce your mental load instead of piling on more. Stay with me. This one's going to shift something for you. It's Women's History Month, and every year we celebrate women who built things, who pushed through, who carried the weight that wasn't theirs to carry, in industries that weren't designed for them, in rooms that didn't want them there, and built something real anyway. I love that. I mean it. And I also want to say something that might be a little uncomfortable. Some of us brought that same pattern right into our own businesses. The pattern of, if I don't hold this, it falls. If I don't stay in it, it breaks. If I step back, something goes wrong, and it's my fault. We learned that in corporate. We learned it in boardrooms and on sets and in offices where we had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. And it kept us safe. It kept things moving. But here's what I've watched happen with my clients and honestly with myself. That same pattern inside a business you own becomes the thing that traps you. Because now you're not fighting to be seen in someone else's system. You built the system. And you accidentally built it to need you in the center of everything. Let me paint you a picture. Perhaps you have built something amazing, something real. The revenue's there. The team is hired. On paper, things look great. But what's actually happening behind the scenes, every major decision still roots back to you. Every project has at least one quick question that somehow lands in your inbox or your DMs or your head at 11 p.m. when you're trying to decompress. You're in the details, you're doing approvals, you're re-explaining the vision for what feels like the 100th time. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you start resenting your team. Maybe it's a quiet resentment. Maybe you don't even call it that, but it is there. The low-grade frustration of, why don't they just get it? The exhaustion of feeling like the only one who actually cares whether the business succeeds. Here's what I want to say right now. The problem is not your team. The problem is that you accidentally built a business that can't run without you. And the great news is that what has been designed can be redesigned. So let's talk financial versus emotional ownership. And I want to start with something that sounds simple, but changes everything when you really let it sink in. You have skin in the game that your employees do not. That is not a flaw in them. It is a structural reality. When you started the business, you took a risk, financial risk, identity risk. You put your name on something and said, I'm betting on this. Every revenue dip is personal. Every slow month keeps you up at night. Every client win feels like confirmation that you made the right call. The person who's working for you, they're doing a job that they're good at, and that's enough. That's exactly what you hired them to do. But then the resentment starts. And listen, the resentment starts the moment you forget that distinction. When you interpret their 9 to 5 energy as a lack of commitment, when you read their I'll handle that tomorrow as indifference, when you notice that they didn't think ahead the way that you would have, and you decide it means they don't care, they're not you. They were never supposed to be you. You hired them to execute a role, not to love the business the way you do. And so here's the shift. Stop measuring employee engagement with founder-level intensity. Start measuring it by role clarity and results. Did they do what they were hired to do in the way you defined it with the quality you required? That's the bar. Not, do they feel what I feel about this business? Because they can't. And asking them to is unfair to them and honestly to you. So here's your AI implementation for this one. Open up your AI tool of choice and literally list out every expectation you currently have of a specific team member, especially one that you feel like isn't taking ownership, in quotes. Then ask it to sort that list into two categories: role clarity expectations and founder energy expectations. And you might be surprised how much of your frustration lives in that second column. Expectations you never articulated because you assumed they were obvious, but they are not obvious. They're just obvious to you, and that's the design gap we're talking about. So, continuing in this theme of not expecting employees to carry your founder level weight, let's talk about culture design in small teams. And this is where I think it gets interesting. I had a client, a fashion brand president with a team of 12, brilliant woman, ran a tight ship, her clients loved her. When I asked her to show me her documented standards, she laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she didn't have any. Everything was in her head, every standard, every expectation, this is how we do what we do here. It was living entirely inside her head and her nervous system. And every time someone missed the mark, she was frustrated. But she never actually had clarified or documented the mark that people were missing. So, not a people problem, documentation problem. And at 500K to around 5 million, most founders that I work with are running what I call an informal culture. The expectations live in the head of the founder, the standards live in the head of the founder, and every time someone doesn't meet those standards, the founder is exhausted. But you've never given your team a real shot at meeting them. That gap between what you think is obvious and what is actually documented and shared repeatedly and explained repeatedly, that's where that resentment breeds. Culture in a small team isn't about ping pong tables or values posters on the walls. It's not about team lunches or ending Slack messages with an exclamation point. It's about design clarity, documented clarity, so that people can operate, make decisions, handle situations, manage priorities without needing your emotional investment to function. That's the ownership that you're looking for. And where most founders are getting this wrong, they think that culture design means that big HR project, like an offsite, a culture deck, something they'll schedule for Q3 when things calm down. Not necessary. Culture design at this age and stage of development in your company is so much simpler than that. It's just writing down the decision rules, the quality standards, the when X happens, we do Y frameworks that are currently living in your nervous system. And here's how AI can help you do this really fast. Describe a recurring situation you keep handling yourself where that ownership gap exists that you're feeling. And ask AI to help you build a decision framework for it. Something like, I keep making the final call on client communication timing. Here's how I think about it. Help me turn this into a protocol my team can follow. That's it. It's not an HR project. That is a Tuesday afternoon, not even a whole Tuesday afternoon. And it's where informal, implicit culture becomes explicit and becomes operational clarity. Real quick, I need to say something before we keep going. Everything we're talking about today, the ownership gap, the unspoken expectations, the decisions that keep routing back to you, this is exactly what we untangle in CEO Clarity Consulting. Most founders who come to me aren't failing, they're succeeding in a structure that was never built to scale. And we fix that. We rebuild your decision architecture, your ownership model, and your time structure so the business can actually move without you in the middle of every moment. If you heard yourself in this episode, if your first thought was, this is just how it has to be, that thought is the design flaw, not you. Book a CEO Clarity call. The link is in the show notes. Okay, back to it. So in this space of letting go of expectations that employees carry founder-level ownership, let's talk about leadership boundary setting. And this is the third piece. This is the one that tends to make people a little uncomfortable in the best possible way. The ownership gap that you're struggling with closes when you stop being available for everything. Every time you answer a question your employee could have answered themselves, you've made yourself a little more necessary. Every approval you give on something that didn't require your approval, you've trained your team to wait for you. And every decision you remake because you just want to check, you've quietly communicated that their judgment isn't enough. Those aren't just inefficiencies, they're the blueprint. You built your business with that blueprint and you can rebuild it. Here's what I mean by leadership boundaries. It's not about being cold. It's not about emotional distance or making yourself hard to reach. I'm saying your team needs to know what requires you and what doesn't. So right now, if the answer to what requires Dawn is anything might go wrong, that's a problem because that's everything. And nothing gets to move with you in the middle of it. The approach I use with my clients and the one I want you to try is warm, clear, and non-negotiable. You can care deeply about your people and stop being the decision hub for every operational moment. Those two things are not in conflict. So here's a question I want you to sit with. What are you approving right now that you could replace with a standing decision rule? Not delegate, not hand off with anxiety, but replace with a rule. So, for instance, when a client asks for a timeline extension, the answer is yes if it's the first request and within 2 weeks. That decision doesn't need me. That's a boundary. That's a rule. That's leadership design. And when you start building those, your team starts operating with more confidence. Your calendar starts opening up, and the business starts to feel less like something you're carrying and more like something you're steering. That's the difference between a founder who's in everything and a CEO who's leading everything. Okay, let's bring this home. Here's what we covered today. The ownership gap between you and your team is for real, and it's structural. You carry financial risk, identity investment, and founder level stakes that your employees simply don't, and that is not a flaw in them. It's a design reality. The moment you stop measuring their engagement by your emotional intensity and start measuring it by role clarity and results, everything gets easier. That ownership gap starts to close. You also learned about how culture design in a small team isn't a big HR project. It's the practice of getting your unspoken expectations out of your head and into documented frameworks. When your team has to guess, they'll guess wrong. And when they have decision rules, they move. So get the standards out of your nervous system and into the systems of your business. And finally, you learned that leadership boundaries aren't about distance, they're about design. Every question you answer that a decision rule could handle instead is keeping you in that bottleneck spot. You're not protecting quality when you're just staying in every decision. So here's your action step for this week. Pick one. One recurring quick question that keeps coming back to you. Write the decision rule for it. 1 sentence, 2 at most. Share it with your team by Friday. And yes, your brain is going to tell you it's not that simple, that this particular situation has too many variables, that you need to think about it more. Write the rule anyway, because clarity you ship beats perfection you're still drafting. That is your first rep, and that's how the redesign starts. If you know someone who's in this building something real, moving fast, but still carrying all of it on her back, send her this episode. That's how we find each other. And I'll leave you with this. Women's History Month is about honoring the women who carried what the world handed them. You've done that. You're still doing it. But the most powerful thing you can build right now, for yourself, for the women watching you, and for every founder who comes after you, is a business that doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself to function and thrive. That's the redesign, and you're ready for it. I'll see you next time, Levy.